years ago, I pulled this engine out of my 911 and it had no oil pressure. I had no idea what I was gonna find. Now it's back together and ready to make twice the power. Oh, and this, yeah, that's one of the connecting rods. In this video, we're gonna look back at the teardown, see why it had no oil pressure, and check out all of the upgrades, including some that cannot be undone. It's like 90 degrees in this garage right now, and I highly doubt I'm gonna get through this, but we'll see, I'm gonna try. So I pulled this engine out of the car, got it on the stand, and wheeled it over to this spot right here. And at this moment, there's kind of two things I'm feeling, right? I'm so excited to tear into an air-cooled 911 engine. I've always wanted to do that. This garage has seen a bunch of engines get torn down and rebuilt, but an air-cooled 911 engine is just something special. If you can name one of these other engines, put it in the comments. That would be pretty impressive. I actually bought the book on how to rebuild this engine when I was 19 years old. And I went in my basement, went through my old books, and it was in there. It was so incredible to find that and be able to actually use it for this because it's still dead on. It's a great book. The rest of the books in that box, yeah, they're not coming out anytime soon. But that book is something I got to unearth, and that's kind of special to be living out something I imagined more than 20 years ago. But at the same time, I'm worried about what I'm going to find. No oil pressure is a big deal, and I'm pretty terrified that there's some real damage inside the engine. I had cut the oil filter open and looked for any metal flakes or forbidden glitter, if you will, and it was super clean. So I had a really good signal that there probably wasn't catastrophic damage inside the engine. That felt great. You still don't know until you open it up. And realistically, it just doesn't take that much damage for the crank to become a paperweight. So I start tearing the engine down, and as I'm getting into the engine, I'm just so happy with what I'm finding. It's looking really good. There's so little oil varnish. Clearly it was taken care of. Yes, I'm finding some wear here and there. The cams were really pitted up. The valve guides were toast. But overall, things were in really good shape. But then I get down to the bear case, and that's where the stakes go up. Right? Damage to the crankshaft, damage to the case are the kind of things that are difficult or impossible to repair. And a crank for this engine, I think, is like 10 grand. I mean, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but it's something astronomical. There's also this feeling as I'm opening the case up that like the last person who saw this crankshaft was a guy who built this engine in '84 in Germany. That's pretty wild to crack this thing open again for the first time in 40 years. So that was kind of fun too. Really, I'm mostly pretending that I'm one of these guys. A million bolts come out, pull the case open, and it looks fantastic. Just like the rest of the engine, like in such good shape. I could basically see my reflection in the crank journals. So visually, such a relief. It looked like I had an engine I could work with. So at this point, you're probably thinking what I was thinking. Like, what gives? Why was there no oil pressure? So I didn't have the smoking gun, but no matter what, I had to get a full baseline for this engine. That meant measuring everything, like a full day's worth of work of measuring. So what that looks like is you've got your micrometer, your caliper, your bore gauge, and you're going through and measuring every single critical component. The goal here is to get down to the accuracy of a fraction of a thousandth of an inch. Because there's so much to track with this, I built a spreadsheet, cataloged all of those measurements. So this little book, I mean, it feels like a little dollhouse book or something like that, but this is where Porsche put every single critical dimension for this engine. So starting with this spreadsheet of every critical dimension, I work through and compare it to the values in this book. In that moment, you know if that part is junk or not. One thing I did find was that the case mains were a little bit larger than they were supposed to be. I was really surprised to find this. It's aluminum case, it's a tough engine, but they were definitely out of spec. And so, as anticlimactic as it is, that's the cause. Just some wear and tear, resulting in some larger tolerances, allowing oil to flow a little bit more freely than it would have in a factory condition. At this point, I knew I could rebuild the engine, but I have two choices. I could restore it to exactly as it was, factory condition, factory new engine, or I could do it my way. I felt like the zero oil pressure and the rust in the body were invitations, or maybe permission to do this the way I want to do it, to leave my own mark in this car. And so the engine did not stay stock, not even close. So to do this rebuild the way I want to do it, I had three goals. The first goal was turbo. When I grew up, my dad had a Porsche 930, and that left such an impression on me as an 8-year-old. I mean, the sound, the power, it's just such a spectacular car. So for me, a turbo and this car, they just fit together. The second goal is that these engines sound amazing, but from the factory, they only rev to like 6,200 RPM. And as the RPMs go up, the sound just gets more and more glorious. So I wanted an engine that could rev to 7,500 RPM. That doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it actually requires a ton of modifications. Now, the last goal is that the next person who opens this case is 40 years from now. Hopefully one of my kids. I want to make this engine as bulletproof as I can. If I went through this full rebuild, it would take us all day. So I'm going to go through 4 areas where I made major updates. This all started with low oil pressure. And so there was no way I was going through that again. The first thing I tackled was the oiling system. This is the stock oil pump. You could say it's the heart of the engine. It kind of looks like a heart. This is not inside this engine because I used a GT3 oil pump. That's a pump with much more capacity. That's designed to run flat out on a racetrack all day long. In a scenario where I have slightly looser tolerances, it shouldn't matter because I have so much more oil capacity that I can still maintain proper oil pressure. It's really probably overkill, but I really don't want a spun bearing, and I'm going to make this as bulletproof as I can. I made one other update to the oiling system, and that was machining in an additional oil channel for the crankshaft. This crankshaft is fed oil from both the front and the back of the crankshaft. I had a third feed added in the middle of the crankshaft. This increases the flow of oil into the crankshaft and to the rod ends. And that's great for high RPM operation, and it's also really great to reduce the chance of spinning a rod bearing. It's actually the same modification that Porsche would do on their own race engines back in the day. This engine may do with low oil pressure for a really long time, but that ends now. So if you've ever been next to a lathe that's spinning at a high RPM with a big chunk of metal on it, you kind of have an appreciation for how much energy is stored in something that's rotating fast. There's just an instinct, and you know you should be really careful. The same thing's true inside your engine. That crankshaft is spinning at 7,000 RPMs, way faster than a lathe would ever go. And when a connecting rod lets go, it stops moving. The crank comes around and transfers all that rotational energy into the impact, destroying everything in its path. It's an awful sound. I never want to hear that sound in this car. This is a stock rod that came out of this engine. So this is where I made a major upgrade to the engine. There's nothing wrong with these rods, but it is known that the bolts that hold the big end together can fail, and especially a high RPM operation. So with the stock red line of 6200, this rod sees about 3,000 pounds of peak force. It sees that 6,000 times a minute. Like, these things go through hell. But the thing is, when you increase that red line to 7,500, that force goes from 3,000 pounds to 5,000 pounds. And there's just no chance that these rod bolts would hold 5,000 pounds. I went with forged steel rods from Potter along with ARP fasteners. The construction and the materials of these parts are, again, made for race car duty and are way beyond what the factory rods could handle. This is another one of those things that may be a little overbuilt, but I'm building this engine to last for a long time. So a bit of a detour on connecting rods. The big end of the rod is held together with the rod bolts. These rod bolts would hold that force. So in my application, that's 5,000 pounds pulling this thing apart 7,000 times every minute. Like, an incredible amount of force. So you want to make sure that those bolts are tightened correctly. The thing is, when you're using a torque wrench, that's only kind of a proxy. The reason high-end bolts come with their own grease is to control for friction. And that makes it so that tightening torque results in a more consistent clamping force. But the best thing to do is actually measure the clamping force. This tool allows me to measure the bolt stretching as I'm tightening the nut. And for these bolts, the proper amount of stretch is 6,000ths of an inch. At 6,000ths of an inch, I've got exactly the correct clamping load holding the end of this rod together. So I know it's not over tightened, but I also know it's tight enough. The stretch was measured in all 12 of the rod end bolts before the crank went back in the engine. This is such a critical part of the engine that there's no such thing as too much attention to detail. The third area we're going to focus on are the heads and the valve train. So with that decision to move to a higher red line of 7,500, a lot has to change up top. So first off, these heads need to be rebuilt. The valve guides were toast. 40 years, 130,000 miles, and air-cooled engines get so hot they wear really fast up top. But in addition to a rebuild and new valves, I also upgraded the valve springs. I went with ASCO valve springs and titanium retainers. So what that does is a higher rate valve spring that has much more force and then lighter weight hardware. This allows that valve to move up and down much more quickly. Right? The thing we're trying to fight here is valve float. When the engine's spinning faster, the valve's got to move faster too. And you need a stronger spring to be able to pull that valve closed. So with this new spring setup and the lightweight titanium hardware, I should be good for 7,500 RPM. In addition, I also had the cams reground. So these cams were actually pretty pitted and really need to be reworked, which is a good excuse to get a better grind. I went with a grind from a 964. It's a little bit more aggressive and not over the top, but this is a turbo motor, so a more aggressive naturally aspirated cam is a pretty good balance. When the heads were rebuilt, I also had the machine for twin plug. So that's 2 spark plugs per cylinder. This goes back again to Porsche racing history. just about all of their race motors were twin plugged. And the reason for that, especially on a turbo motor, is that having two spark plugs means the flame front has much less distance to travel, which in turn means I can run a lot less timing advance. I could do a video on this. It's a whole topic, but basically it's going to make more power and it's going to make the engine a lot safer to operate. And because race car. So with rebuild heads, twin plug, a more aggressive cam grind, more aggressive valve springs, titanium hardware, the heads and valve train of this engine are ready for boost and higher RPM. Of the 4 modifications we're going to cover, I think I saved the best for last. The pistons. This engine's going to see some boost. It has a turbo, and that means the compression ratio has got to go down. The stock 3.2 liter engine had a compression ratio of 9.5 to 1. That's too much compression ratio to pile boost on top. Now the stock turbo 930 from this era had 7 to 1 compression ratio, like incredibly lazy. That 7 to 1 was helping them account for things like poorer fuels and also much less precise engine management. I set a goal of 8.5 to 1, which should be just about right to run low boost on this engine with a dual plug setup. It's a decent compromise where the engine should be responsive off boost and hopefully not grenade on boost. But how can I lower the compression ratio? Well, I could buy new pistons and cylinders. That's about $5,000. These 40-year-old pistons and cylinders with 130,000 miles on them were absolutely mint, in fantastic shape. And I was lucky that I had Molle pistons and cylinders, and the Nicosil liner was mint. Like, if there's a part of this car that's been on the whole journey and I can keep it, I'm going to keep it. What I ended up doing is putting the pistons in a lathe and taking off 10 grams of aluminum off the top. Removing that material makes the combustion chamber bigger and lowers the compression ratio. The math behind this actually isn't all that complicated. The thing is, these pistons and cylinders are matched by tolerance set. So if I destroy a piston, I destroy a cylinder. So there was really no room for error here. Luckily, through the forums, I was able to get a stock 3.2 liter piston that has a lot of damage on top. Something happened in here that wasn't great. This allowed me to do a trial run and also to make sure that I wasn't getting too thin on the crown material. It took an afternoon at a friend's machine shop and the pistons were ready to roll. And after that, I balanced the pistons to within 1 gram. Machining these pistons was the most nerve-wracking part of this whole rebuild. I could be wrong, but I haven't seen this done before. It's always kind of fun to do something for the first time. I can't see a reason why this wouldn't work, but that also doesn't mean it will work. But I guess we'll cover that in a future video. If you're still here, that's awesome. Thank you so much. It's been so fun sharing this project, and there's a lot more to cover. From the turbo system, all the 3D printing, custom manifold, but also just the paintwork and rust repair. Please let me know what you want me to dig into. I'm happy to do so. And I appreciate you. Thank you. Until next time.